So you want to turn this into this? Stay tuned. Welcome to Crafted by Metamorphic Customs. I'm Desi, and hopefully I'll be showing you how to create the diorama you just saw on your screen. Now, Hot Toys, right? We all collect them, we love them. Their bases sometimes... yeah, that's as plain Jane as you get for a high-end expensive figure. I mean, the metal nameplate, that's pretty cool. At least it's consistent sometimes. What if you can make this look a little better, right? That's the whole point here. Voila. Pretty cool, huh? Also interchangeable. Best part is, you can make this yourself, and I'll be showing you exactly how to do that. Before we do, so the materials we'll be using today, I'm going to name them all when we're going through the workshop, but more importantly, you don't have to pause the video or anything like that. All the materials are named in the description of the video below. They're all there. Some of them have links, some of them are affiliate links. They're listed as well. But the point is, the entire list is there. I encourage you to go to your local hobby store or your hardware store, find them there. If you can't, just use the links below. These are the actual links I use to purchase these items. All right, let's go to the workshop. All right, let's start off by placing a cutting mat down to protect your work surface. Very important. Our first piece of material would be plastic styrene. We'll be using a template that you can see in the link below the video. It has all the measurements, but more importantly, you can just cut out the template and use it to cut off the piece of styrene. And in true cooking show fashion, we've got one ready to go here. All we have to do is trace it and then start cutting. Don't forget to also trace the small rectangular hole towards the top there. That's for the grabber post. To cut it, I'm going to be using this Tamiya scriber, or scriber, whatever you want to pronounce it. It's my preferred tool, but you could also use an X-Acto blade. The goal here is to make slow, shallow passes. This is kind of sped up just for time, but take your time here. You're not going to cut it in one go. And as you can see, use a metal ruler. Do not attempt to use a plastic one or a wooden one. You're just going to cut into it. You're going to make a bad cut. So take your time. When you're done, just pop it out. When you do that, then go back and cut out the small square hole or rectangular hole. Make sure to clean it up with an X-Acto blade, the hole specifically. And then check, just make sure that the grabber post fits. Double check it on the base. Perfect. Let's move on to our XPS foam, which is 1 inch thick. You're going to make your initial cuts, which are 2 inches by 2.5 inch rectangles. You're going to cut out 2 pieces at this size using an Olfa utility knife or something like this. The point is, you should be able to extend the blade nice and long for it to completely cut through the 1 inch thick XPS foam. You're not going to try to cut it in one go. You're going to make multiple shallow passes. Next, you're going to cut out a 1 inch by 1 inch 90-degree angle here. Just going 1 inch and 1 inch from one of the corners here. It doesn't matter in which direction. I know it's 2 by 2.5 inch piece here, but you're just going to go in 1 inch by 1 inch from one of the corners. And it's just on one piece. You're going to make this 90-degree cut into one of the 2.5 by 2 inch pieces. Next, you'll move on to cut more XPS foam. This time, you're going to cut out an 8 inch long by 2 inch wide piece. Actually, you're going to cut this 3 times. So 3 8 inch by 2 inch long pieces. And again, this is still the 1 inch thick XPS foam. Next up, you're going to cut out a section out of one of those long XPS pieces you just cut. You're going to come in from the long edge about 1 inch in and then draw a line. Then grab your styrene base that you've already cut previously, place it up against that line you just drew, kind of center it, and then draw lines to basically frame it in there, or frame the section that falls within this piece of foam. Go ahead and mark the center of that foam. That's the center part that you're going to cut out. Again, use your Olfa utility knife. Slowly cut it out. I'm going to label it top here just to keep the orientation right. Then I'm going to get the second piece out of the three that I cut off, and I'm just putting it at the top. And you see I label that top too. Trace it and mark that section out. Make sure it still fits the styrene piece of base there. And then go ahead and mark out the very top of that center hole. That's just to make sure where that skinny line is that's going to come into play later. After you mark that center hole, just trace out the entire line like I've done so here. Just making sure it fits, and now you're actually going to use some glue to paste this down. You can use any glue except super glue. Do not use super glue, it'll melt the foam. You use Elmer's glue, that works wonders. I use hot glue because I have the patience of a toddler, and it just works faster. You're going to mark out this line here. This line is going to represent the back wall. I know this doesn't make much sense now, but just try to follow what I'm doing in the video here. I've colored it in just so you can see it a little bit better. Go ahead and start cutting that out. In other words, see where I cut there at the center? That represents where the post is going to be. Now we're going to do that same thing for the third piece, which was 8 inches long by 2 inches wide. We're going to cut that out as well. Remember, take your time. I've switched over to an X-Acto blade. X-Acto blades aren't as good as the Olfa utility knife here, but these cuts don't need to be that precise. And I'm going to line that up again, and when I'm ready, I'm going to use the hot glue to make sure these things stick together. There we go. Perfect. Remember those two smaller pieces we cut up before? Yeah. Go ahead and glue them together. And just checking here to make sure everything fits. Yep. Good to go. Now let's go back to the three larger pieces here, and I'm just going to grab the Olfa knife and start carving towards the top, carving out rock shapes. The important thing is don't cut out inside the center channel of the bottom piece, the squared center channel which fits directly hugging the Hot Toy space, right? Because that's supposed to be tighter fitting around the Hot Toy space. You don't want to cut into that. But again, just cut out the sides and the top, making small cuts to essentially carve out a rock shape. There's no science to this. There's no pattern. Just make jagged cuts, little divots here and there. I'm not using any reference material here. I'm just going at it at random. I'm trying to make it not smooth, the opposite of smooth. You know, give it some texture as much as you can here. And then do the same thing on the smaller piece. Again, don't cut into the shallow cut, the 90-degree cut there that goes up against the Hot Toys base, because that's exact. That's supposed to fit over. Then get a couple of pieces of spare XPS, probably from the pieces you've just carved out, or the bigger, larger pieces, right? And cut those down. Those are going to be smaller rocks that are going to go on top of the styrene base. And then grab an actual rock. Something with hopefully some jagged edges, something that you're going to use to press against the rock you've carved out. You're using this actual real rock to create textures in this XPS foam. Then go ahead and grab your styrene sheet and place it in there in the groove you've cut out. This should be exact. Use hot glue and then go ahead and stick it in there. Remember, you should still have clearance to put the post through that hole, as you can see there. Then go ahead and glue the rock that's going to go up in the front. And you can put this in either corner. Next up, tile grout. That's what this is, sanded tile grout. And you're going to mix that with Mod Podge matte. 50-50 mix ratio, it's not exact, just 50-50 Mod Podge and sanded tile grout. And some black paint here to make a light gray. Paint the entire rock section, just the rocks, front and back. And then next up, you're going to get some AK Interactive Dry Ground Terrain. You're going to mix a little bit of that with brown paint. So first get some of that AK Interactive, place it in a disposable container. I'm using a paper cup here. Mix it with a little bit of Hobbycraft brown paint. And when you're ready, just start painting that styrene sheet. AK Interactive terrain paste will dry and leave a nice texture there. And this texture will be a little different than the texture that's on the rock, right? So it's nice to have different textures. And you can use the terrain paste to glue down these spare bits of rocks. Put those spare bits wherever you'd like. Next, you'll need a palette and some FW inks. These are acrylic water-based inks. I'm using sepia and black. I'm going to put about 3 to 4 drops of sepia in this palette and then 1 drop of black ink. Mix the rest with some H2O. There's no exact formula here, but the FW inks go a long way, so put about 30 drops of water. Next, go ahead and just grab some paint there. I'm grabbing some of the ink and mixing it with some of the just plain water, even more to water it down to get it to a point where I like. And I'm just going to cover the entire rock section. Don't forget the smaller rocks either. You also do the front rock, of course. Next, I'm going to get some burnt umber, about 3 to 4 drops, and the rest is water. So 3 to 4 drops of burnt umber and 30 drops of water there. And I'm going to use that to paint the actual ground. Obviously, wait till the AK Interactive is dry before you place the washes on it. But once it's dry, go ahead and place the washes. I'm going back and then putting more of the wash around the edges. You can even grab some of the sepia that you made from before, the sepia and black for the rocks, and then start putting that around the edges of the ground, getting the edges darker. Next up, we're going to do some dry brushing, and you have to do the dry brushing once all the inks have completely dried. You're going to get some light tan or light beige, basically a color that looks like this. And you're going to lightly pass a brush over the ground in this case. This is called dry brushing. Once you're done with that, you're going to repeat the same technique of dry brushing, but with a light gray on the rocks. I'm going to do this over all the rocks. Remember, you barely have any paint on your brush while you're doing this technique called dry brushing. If you haven't heard of this before, it might seem a little weird because you're grabbing paint just to wipe it back off on a piece of paper. So it seems like you're wasting paint, but it's a pretty cool technique and a pretty cool effect once you're done. It's really picking up that texture. Next, get some branches. Go for a walk. Pick up some dead branches outside. Make sure they're not brittle or falling apart, but just get some branches you like, and that's what you're going to place down. Once you've got a couple that you like and a position that you like, go ahead and get the hot glue and paste them down. Next up, foliage. Now these are random pieces, long grass, a couple of different ferns that I'm going to be using. Links for all this are down below as well. And you're just going to randomly place them wherever you think is best. Just try not to place it in the center unless you really want to. I say that because you want to give some flat areas or some room for your figure to actually stand in. If you put it in the middle, it's going to be hard to stand a figure even with the use of the grabber post, right? So something like that towards the back. And I'm using hot glue to secure it. Go ahead, keep going with all the bits and pieces you want. I'm just using a couple of ferns here. As far as growth goes, I don't know if this is realistic, if these particular ferns would grow next to this particular long grass, right? But who cares? It looks pretty cool. Next up, leaf scatter, or chopped oregano, which is what this is. Then you're going to use some watered down PVA glue, and you're going to do a 50-50 mix of that PVA or Elmer's glue and water. You're placing that down to glue the leaf scatter. After you place down the leaf scatter, I'm then going back and putting some more of that watered down PVA Elmer's glue over it with a pipette. Next up, I've got some Woodland Scenics clumps, grass clumps here, and I'm just putting that down in the same way I put down the leaf scatter, using the watered down PVA glue. Next up, a little bit more shading with washes here. And this is the exact same washes I use for the ground and for the rocks. Same exact mixtures, I use the same palette. And I'm just getting those dark colors and basically going over the leaf scatter that has now dried in place. That just adds some more tonality to it. It brings some shadow into it where it should be shadow and filters everything together. Puts a filter over everything so it just blends all together. Next, I'm fitting it over the actual base once it's dry to see how that looks. Not too bad. As you can see, pretty neat. I think it looks a lot more live here. You're going from this basic base to this. And it's interchangeable. Now you're on Endor. You can interchange them with different figures, as long as the base shape is the same, the rectangular base. And you can create variations on theme. This is that same forest base, right? But without the foliage, because it's snowing. Looks pretty cool. And the best part is that it's interchangeable between any of the similar size Hot Toys base, right? But the other important part as well You don't have to limit yourself to this size. I mean, you could get smaller if you're thinking about terrain for wargaming, or much larger enough to fit 6-scale figures or quarter-scale figures in a Magic case, right? It could be any size you want. You just have to use the same techniques over and over. In fact, go down to the comments and tell me if you think I did something wrong or think I could do it better. Share your techniques. You know, that's the whole point of this video, again. By the way, if you liked the video, please give me a like, hit like down below, and subscribe, because coming up in the next episode of Crafted, I'm going to be showing you how to do the same thing, another topper, but this time a variation of a theme. I already showed you a preview, right? It's going to have some snow on rocks instead of the foliage. So kind of the foliage has died out because it's snowing in the forest, right? So this one will be a little quicker. So if you like it, again, like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned. See you next time, and stay crafted.